Facebook family and YouTube family. Welcome to another wonderful Sunday evening session with Brian and Janice. It has been such a beautiful weekend, and I hope everybody has truly enjoyed this weekend. The weather was just superb, and it was just a delightful weekend. I cannot believe that we're in the middle of October, almost at the end of October. Where has 2024 gone? But we have no idea what's coming in 2025. There is a lot going on, as people say. But you know, it's going to be okay. It is just going to be okay. We are very fortunate to have Brian with us tonight, as always, who does all of the research for our shows. And I just kind of chime in wherever, which is great because that's just where my brain is right now. If it's not medical, I don't know it. I don't want to talk about it. But anyway, it has just been just a fabulous month already. We're almost at the brink of the election. And I know everybody wants to talk about it. Everybody is all up in the air about it. But you know what? It doesn't matter who gets in. It doesn't matter who wins. Just know that as long as you trust and believe, we're going to be all right. We're always going to be all right. We always have been all right. Even when we didn't think we were going to make it, we made it. If you are here today, tonight, watching this show, you made it. So Brian and I are going to get started. We're just going to hash out some things with you guys tonight. You know, let's talk about where do we go from here, okay? What is our economy looking like? African-American, black people, we are waking up at enormous. Am I saying that right? Enormous. I'm sorry, I don't know where my brain is. Enormous levels. I mean, we're just waking up and we're reading more, we're researching more, and we really want to know what's going on and where do we go from here. It's nothing to be afraid of. All you need to do is just know that it's coming. It's going to be a little different, and we need to be prepared. But without further ado, Brian, come on and take us away.
Well, good evening, Facebook family. Good evening, YouTube family. As Janice has stated, we'll be discussing a little bit of everything tonight. She wants to have the discussion as it relates to some of the things that are happening right now, some of the things that are going to be happening as we move forward into this election. We're only, 2 weeks away from November the 5th. So I think it's important to say to everyone, please exercise your right to vote. We don't tell you who to vote for, but we do encourage you to get out and vote because your vote makes a difference.
It matters.
Please know that. Please know that. So we're going to be discussing, just like I said, a broad range of things tonight. So when we look at the state of Black America and where it is 60 years after the Civil Rights Act was actually passed into law. We know that happened in 1964. It's 60 years later. It's 2024. The question on the floor is Black America any better off than we were prior to the Civil Rights Act being signed into law? So let's kind of recap some of the issues and some of the things that Black America was dealing with as far as equality issues prior to the Civil Rights Act being signed into law. One thing that they were dealing with was housing, unfair housing. So it was very difficult for Black people to get loans at that time. So we know that the Fair Housing Act was part of the Civil Rights Act, okay, which allowed Black people to be able to apply for loans.
Yes.
And it made the process, it evened out the process. I will not say that it equalized the process because it did not. There were still a lot of parameters left in place and a lot of loopholes that Black people have to jump through even now that the Fair Housing Act did not deal with. But it did make it accessible to get loans as it relates to housing. So that's one thing. Let's look at another thing. Another thing we know prior to that, Brown versus the Board of Education. Okay, that was 1955. All right, when we talk about Brown versus the Board of Education, something that the Civil Rights Act reiterated was that education should be equal. Should be accessible and available to all, and that black people should have the same access to books and resources that white institutions had.
Exactly.
Okay, so when we look at that today, as far as where we are right now, some of the things that we're dealing with right now is the banning of books. Why are we having to actually deal with this issue that was supposedly taken care of up under the 1964 Civil Rights Act that did away with Jim Crow laws? Well, we're seeing some of these things resurface. The equality piece dealing with education, having the same access to resources that white children had to educate themselves. Black people are now having to retract and actually go back and look at the educational piece of the Civil Rights Act and having to fight in court now to get resources that supposedly was taken care of in 1964 up under the Civil Rights Act.
Exactly.
When it was signed into law. Now we're having to fight to keep our history from being banned out of books. We're having to fight to have certain books taught in our school systems now. So we see that is one thing that we're struggling with even today, 60 years later, that supposedly should have been fixed. Some of that should have been fixed with Brown versus the Board of Education, okay? And then the other portion of that should have been handled up under the Civil Rights Act. But now we're still having to deal with some of those same issues. Brown versus the Board of Education, we know, was about the integration piece, okay? Public schools are more integrated now than they were in 1964. Okay, so we're having to now deal with that again. And let's talk about another piece of the Civil Rights Act that I think is indeed also a struggle today when it comes to black people. Something that the Civil Rights Act had also embedded into it was equal employment opportunities.
Okay.
We know what came out of that was the EEOC. The development of the EEOC was through the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission was developed to make sure that no one was discriminated based on race, creed, color, sex, or gender. You could not, religion, you could not be discriminated against.
Exactly.
Well, if you look at today's job market and you look at our children that are graduating from high school, those that go on to higher education, those that enter into the trade field, those fields literally are being occupied now by immigrants that are coming in and taking jobs.
Yes.
Okay, and then not only that, you still have certain businesses that discriminate based on color. They will put resumes of our children at the bottom of the stack. So we're still having to fight as it relates to equal employment opportunities. It's very unfortunate. And when we say immigrants, we're talking about legal immigrants here. I'm not talking about someone coming in that's not legal.
Right.
So we're talking about those children that are coming in and those families that are coming in. A lot of them come in by way of military.
Right.
Okay. And then you have those that come in by way of, if you're in higher education, by way of exchange, learning programs.
Right.
Okay. And then you also have those that come in up under the work status and gain citizenship here. Whether they're leaving their country for better opportunities, whatever the case may be. And then you have some that come in with corporations that are actually building manufacturing over here.
Yes.
A good example of that would be Hyundai.
And Kia.
And Kia,
Yes.
exactly right. And so when we look at that, and you look at some of those positions, even though probably the majority of those positions were filled by us initially when it comes to manufacturing, if we're just using Kia and Hyundai, but as time progressed and more immigrants come in, those positions that we held we're now being replaced by those immigrant workforce that is coming in.
That's exactly
to America. So when we look at the state of Black America, brothers and sisters, from 1964 to 2024, 60 years later, if you had to grade where we are on a scale from A to F, what would you grade our progress as?
A B minus.
I would agree with you. I was going to say a C to a D plus. Some progress have been made, but the progress that have been made, we're slowly seeing a regression of that progress.
You know, Brian,
So,
it's like every time they put something in place to further help us, it gets set back. Think about the equal opportunity. What's that?
yeah, equal opportunity employment.
No, the other one, where they just banned it at all the colleges, a lot of the colleges.
DEI.
DEI,
Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
inclusion. We had that, and it was working for a while, right? And then now they just did away with all of that. So it's like every time we take one step forward and we're making progress with something, that gets kicked back.
Well, let me say this. DEI stands for don't ever include. Okay. It doesn't stand for diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Well, that's what they gave it.
That is what they called it, diversity, equity, and inclusion. But actually, DEI, and let me break DEI down for you. Okay. Let's go back and look at the inception and the origin of DEI. DEI came about because of George Floyd.
Right.
Okay. With the lynching of George Floyd by a police officer that happened to be captured on video, white America was empathetic and was touched. And I'm just putting it in layman's terms. Okay. So they were very empathetic about what happened to George Floyd. White America felt like there needed to be something done as a response to the lynching that was caught on video relating to Brother George Floyd. Their response was, we need to create opportunity in the workplace and create workspace to hire more black people. Okay, that is the actual origin. That's when you saw corporations begin to adopt programs and put programs in place to ensure that if nothing else, they were interviewing more blacks.
Yes.
And if the blacks were qualified, they were bringing them into certain positions, that they had equal access to those jobs that everybody else were filling and everybody else had access to as well.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's the actual origin when we look at diversity, equity, and inclusion. It did not start in the college ranks. So it started on the corporate level.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I
and then
remember.
it trickled down into what we saw the college adopt was DEI programs once the actual plan was put in place in corporate America and how to actually maneuver in relation to bringing in those that were qualified, that were of African American descent, and making sure that those groups also had opportunities to express their talents, their gifts. Then it matriculated down to the school system, okay, from corporate America. But we saw the blueprint of the program developed in corporate America. Okay. Here's the flaw with DEI in its inception. It covered a broad spectrum as it relates to the group that it was actually reaching out to in reference to giving them opportunities. Okay, so DEI, the basic program says that we will bring in people of color. So the diversity portion actually was Indians, people of color, would include Indians, Asians, Hispanics, any of your Latinos, okay? It did not, your mulattoes, okay, LGBTQIA, so it included those groups. Here was the failure with DEI. It did not speak to African Americans. It did not specify African Americans, nor did it specify Black. The problem with that was, when you look at the DEI structure, okay, DEI included color, but color excluded Black people. It never identified the African American based off of the development and the inception and the origin of why the plan was put in place, which was George Floyd's murder, a Black man's murder. They never included Black people. So Black people were considered to be part of the colored group. Okay? So whenever you now incorporate or assimilate Blacks into the colored group, then you can racially discriminate against them if they identify themselves as anything other than the color groups that are specified. You got every other color group name. You got every other ethnic group name except African American. Okay, so there was racism embedded in diversity, equity, and inclusion right in its formation, in its inception. And that is something that people began to challenge. Okay, that is something that people began to call out. You got every group, you specify Asians, you specify Indians, you specify Latinos, you specify Hispanics, you specify LGBTQIA, but you leave out African American or Black, which identifies a certain group in America who are the descendants of those that were enslaved. You've got every group except them identified ethnically.
Wow.
Okay. So, like I said, discrimination and racism was embedded in that. Even though they were saying that no African Americans is included in the color genre, there's no way that we could be included in that, because the experience of the African American was drastically different from those other ethnic groups and persuasions that were included. They didn't have the same experience as the African American. Number two, the African American, as far as educationally, was a little bit different from those ethnic groups that were actually stipulated in the creation of DEI programs. Now, here's why I said what it truly meant was don't ever include. They included everybody, and literally what was written in the programs, in most DEI programs, is you include everybody, but don't ever include African Americans. It was a failed policy and program
From the beginning.
From the start, because it still excluded the people group that you were supposed to be created for. It did the same thing that affirmative action did. Affirmative action worked for a solid maybe 3 to 4 years. Then after that, everybody started using the affirmative action laws to state that they were being discriminated against. So when we saw that happen, reverse discrimination crept its way into the wording of affirmative action. And then you had people filing lawsuits
Sure did.
related to reverse discrimination based on the affirmative action laws that were supposedly written for African American people. Affirmative action is no good, just like DEI is no good, don't ever include. So it's not a surprise that we see the governor of the state of Alabama roll that back, because don't ever include African Americans is the motto for her, in her mind. Why are we doing something special for them? No, we'll include all other color groups, but we will not include African Americans. So let's pull this away from ASU. Let's pull this away from Alabama A&M. Let's pull this away from Miles College. Let's pull this away from University of Alabama. We don't want those children saying that or we don't want them getting a break financially. You understand what I'm saying? Because they are considered minority, a minority group.
Yes,
Okay?
yes, yes.
So we don't want them going to the University of Alabama. We don't want too many of them. We'll let a specific ratio go.
Yes,
okay.
right.
But the spirit of Governor George Wallace still stands at the door and says the same thing that he said 60 years ago.
And those that got in, they were very fortunate.
They were fortunate, but we understand the story. But what was the spirit of George Wallace? Segregation now, segregation forever. Okay, that's what he stated on the campus in the doors of the University of Alabama. Even though some blacks broke through, we thank God for that. For the dear sister, I think her name was Bertha, I can't remember her full name, the first person to integrate the University of Alabama. But when we look at the affirmative action program, when we look at don't ever include program, DEI, diversity, inclusion, equity and inclusion, that is what it actually means.
Okay.
It was written with embedded discrimination and racism still to the African American.
Okay.
We have to recognize that. We have to understand that. And we have to get away from policies that still exclude those people that identify themselves with their enslaved ancestors that came over here. Okay? Affirmative action, Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Civil Rights Act of 1865. We have to go back and revisit those things. You understand what I'm saying?
To get it right.
To actually get it right. To make sure that we do not repeat the same verbiage, and we do not allow people to put policies in place with embedded coded languages that leave us out. You understand?
I get it.
So when we talk about policies, and this is very important for African Americans to understand, Janice, when we talk about policies, we need to make sure that policies are not just amended. Okay? So what do I mean when I say that? An amendment could mean that you change the word, but the definition remains the same. Okay? That actually started in the mid-1800s. Okay? So, give you a perfect case, an example. When the South, actually after the Civil War, okay, in Reconstruction, the South paid reparations to the slave master. Most people we don't ever talk about that. We don't ever talk about the Europeans in up north that got reparations for those slaves. The South got reparations for those slaves that entered into the Union to fight. The South masters got reparations for their slaves that actually entered into the Union to fight against the Confederate Army. The slaves, because Virginia, as far as Virginia, that's still South. Okay, you understand? Most people look at it as North, but it is South. they got their slave owners also
got reparations
for their slaves that fought for the Union Army and those that were even killed. We don't talk about that. See, every group has gotten reparations, but when they wrote policies after Reconstruction, some of the things that we saw with Reconstruction were land grants. We know that General Sherman, we never got the 40 acres and a mule, even though he wrote out, a decree stating this is what, after he had that meeting with the Negro leaders in South Carolina. You understand what I'm saying? He wrote out a decree that this is what the blacks want, and this is what we should give them. We should give them 40 acres. We should give them $100, and we should give them a working mule to plow their land. That was what was written in the decree. You understand? But the old switcheroo, this is when this word developed. The switcheroo came when the 40 acres and a mule was retracted, and the wording of the decree
was just amended, not
changed. That's right. The wording of the decree was actually changed.
Oh, it was?
The wording was changed, but the definition remained the same. You understand what I'm saying? So we have to be careful when we're dealing with history that we don't fall to the same tricks when it comes to black people. See, DEI, don't ever include, was the failed policies or the failed program of affirmative action. It was nothing different. Listen, give you another example. The 2025 plan that everybody's talking about is the same plan of America First under the Bush administration. It is the same exact plan. There's a few words as far as have been changed, but the definition...
Is that what they're calling Project 2025?
That's Project 2025 is America's First plan.
And that's what they're saying.
It's no different.
Is that what they're saying, that that's Trump's plan? That's what they're
calling
it?
It's not Trump's plan, but yes, they attach it to Trump. Why? Because he supposedly signed on to it. But all I'm saying is we have to be careful to understand that there are no new tricks.
Yes.
Okay. It is the same old thing regurgitating itself over
and over.
And we have to be conscious and aware enough to recognize that and to say, no, we're not going to allow you to put the same failed program in place that did not work 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago.
And it's not going to work now.
That's right, because you have not changed anything in it. Yes. With diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee with my company. Okay. So I have a chance to, and the beautiful thing is there, to interject and to share with them. And I did share with them what I just shared with you about African American. The director of our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee said, Brian, it's something I never heard that. I didn't know that. That's expected. You're not African American. She is Latino. You understand what I'm saying? So quite naturally, she didn't have a clue that you're still excluding African Americans. If we're going to have this program, then let's make it fair.
Yes.
And let's put African American in there.
Yes.
Just like you identify every other ethnic group.
Yes.
You understand what I'm saying? So with the state of Alabama, don't ever include DEI. They said, let's do away with it.
Yes.
Florida, same way. Don't ever include, do away with it. Same as affirmative action. Okay. After the takeover with affirmative action was women and white men claiming reverse discrimination.
Yes.
Okay. It was a takeover. And after those two groups start using affirmative action, every other group had access to use that to start suing as part of that minority group. Totally excluding black people. Black people have never experienced the full advantage of the affirmative action program and policies that were established for us to minimize discrimination and racism against our people. We never experienced the brunt of that, just like with government programs. You understand what I'm saying? When we look at Social Security, they want to do away with that now. You look at the GI Bill with our young men that's going into the service, armed forces, they want to do away with that. Well, black people did not have access to those programs
until recently,
until way after World War II.
Exactly.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Those programs were put in place by President Roosevelt to deal with white veterans' families that were not able to take care of themselves if their loved one was killed in action. Black people did not have access to those programs and were not considered, even though they were serving in the same war. It's really sad. Sure. GI Bill, that is a Johnny come. It's a recent thing that we have just been able to. Social Security, same way. When Social Security was initiated after during the so-called after the Great Depression, okay, and coming out of that, and we saw everything put in place to deal with make sure that the Great Depression don't happen again. Social Security, black people did not have access to Social Security, even though they were paying their taxes just like everybody else in America.
Yes, yes.
So black people would work 30, 40 years and could not get Social Security check. So we have to really deal with the true state of where we are now. We can't stick our heads in the sand and say that we don't have issues now that is just as great as the issues that we had to deal with in 1964 and the policies that were put in place to try to rectify some of those things. We are still fighting for today. We're still in the same struggle. The battle continues. And I think it's intensified because now you don't have overt racism anymore.
Yeah.
You have introverted racism now.
It's hidden.
That's right. It's concealed purposely, and it's concealed through the law now.
Yes, yes.
You understand?
Because we're not researching and reading, and we don't have a voice out there advocating for these, these laws. But Brian, it is sad to see that our people are still not getting it. They're not they don't see the handwriting on the wall.
Well, one reason that our people are in the dark is, it goes back to Hosea 4:6, where it says our people perish because of a lack of knowledge. So we understand that. But what is the premise behind that? Okay, that is what we have to ask ourselves. See, there's a difference between education, intellectualism, and institutionalism. Okay? Institutionalism is someone that has been taught to think, talk, and act a certain way.
Yeah.
That's an institutionalized person. Okay? An educational background or a person that is educated is someone that takes it upon themselves after they've been institutionalized to break the curse of talking, acting, and saying what the institution told them was the correct thing to say, the correct thing to think, and the correct way to act. So most people don't get educated until after they break away from the institution. Okay? So when you educate yourself, you go beyond what the institution taught. And what you find out is most of what the institution taught you was fictitious. Yeah. Because it was from a Western viewpoint. It had no other culture integrated into the source by which they were teaching. Okay? So everything was taught from a Western European
Concept.
mindset and thought process. You understand?
I do.
So an educated person will always go beyond the institution to learn what was it that the institution taught me. That's why I say when you go back to the Constitution and you read the Constitution of the United States, something that has never been amended, and people say that 1865, when the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment was put in place, that it dealt with citizenship, but in actuality it did not. So what did the Constitution say was a citizen? The Constitution stipulates that a citizen was someone that was 21 years old, white male, and a property owner.
Which didn't include us.
Okay. Never included black people. Okay. Majority of black people today are not property owners, so by definition in the Constitution, they are not citizens. Because guess what? The 14th Amendment did not deal with the property owner situation. You understand what I'm saying? So there are little things that we have to recognize that would never change, that were left in place. The 13th Amendment did not deal with slavery. What it did was it legalized slavery and said if they go to prison, then them being enslaved is okay. So you still have the word that, so they legalized slavery. Okay? They made it, put it on the state's back and says, okay, you could work these brothers and sisters for free. So even in Alabama, in my history book on Alabama, just strictly Alabama, the so-called liberated, emancipated slaves were imprisoned up under the new penal system in the laws that were put in place based on the 13th Amendment. Okay? And they built all the railroads. They built all the steel. They worked for free. They used those, they incarcerated, mass incarceration in the state of Alabama after emancipation. And see, even the 13th, 14th, and 15th
Did they
Amendment.
give those people anything?
No, they not, it was contract, what we call now contract labor. Okay. Through the state of Alabama in the prison system.
So the state got paid.
The state made money off the labor. So it's just like them getting paid. You understand? So if you contract, and that is still in place today. So I tell people, we have enough lawmakers, African-American lawmakers, to where even in the state of Alabama, we could come together and say, we need to revisit.
The 13th Amendment.
We need to revisit. First, let's start with the Alabama Constitution of 1901. That is the longest constitution in the world. Let's start right there. Okay? And let's deal with that. We just in 2022 voted to remove words that were demeaning out of the Alabama Constitution, but we did not deal with the rest of the Constitution. Wow. Okay? So when you look at the Alabama Constitution, legally, black men, specifically, quote unquote, are still oppressed as it relates to some of the laws written in, as it relates to the state of Alabama and what we call justice. Okay? So I often say that, yes, justice is blind, but it's blind to us because it only sees one point of view. And unfortunately, we're not included in that point of view. Like I said, DEI, don't ever include them. That's what that literally stands for. And that's in anything that we do. So we got to start going back and really looking at, as historians, as people that are so-called educated. Then I left out the last group. So I said institutionalized, educated, and then the last group was what? Intellectuals. What is an intellectual?
I think that's a person that studies and that knows a vast array of things, not just one subject matter.
An intellectual is someone that specializes in their subject matter only.
Okay. Am I included in that?
Yes. So an intellectual only reads as it pertains to the
Their
knowledge
field
they
of
need to
study.
know at that particular time.
But that
Or
can be
that-
different things. That can be different things.
But see, here is, now I can take a black person out of the ghetto and they are much smarter than the average intellectual. You know why? Because they have developed a skill set to where they master all things. So that is where you get the common phraseology, master of all things, jack of trades, okay? Master of all, jack of trade of all, a master of none.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll get it right. It's on the tip of my tongue. But that is where that phrase comes from. Okay?
Jack of all trades and master of none.
Yeah, well, it's something like that.
Because you can do all things.
Yes.
But
yes.
you master none of them.
That's right. I'm a jack of all trades. That is where that developed from. It developed from the brothers and sisters in the ghetto that knew how to do anything. You can go to them to fix your car. They could come and fix the washer, the dryer. It didn't matter what it was.
They could fix everything.
They were jack of all trades, master of none. Yeah. Much smarter than the intellectual that has been institutionalized. You understand what I'm saying? So, and have failed to educate themselves. Okay? So, a person that is well read knows a little bit about everything. And look, here's the difference in a person that's well read as it relates to knowing everything. They try to master it.
Yes, they do.
Okay. They seek mastery in whatever it is that they do, that they read, that they study. So, we were, having discussion this morning with my family. Mm-hmm. And they were saying, well, since you are a historian, but I'm a self-educated historian.
Yes.
Self-taught on everything from ancient African spirituality to ancient African history to African American history to civil rights history. So everything. And I sought out to master it. Western European history, Indian history.
You were institutionalized.
Even though I'm an institution, I chose to educate myself. Mm-hmm. You understand what I'm saying? So the institution equipped me with the tools to educate my own self and to master it. So there's no subject, even the law, with my studying during the law, I studied to master it.
Okay.
So we have to, as black people, in order to help those people that are on the lower echelon, our people on the lower echelon. And I tell people, there are exceptions to every rule, okay? So there are young men like myself that make it out of the ghetto by tenacity and sheer will and sheer desire that says, I'm going to overcome my circumstances. There are a lot of brothers that are in the position and their successes are because of their will and their desire to not be a statistic. You understand? We may have had good parents, some may not have had good parents, but they make up their mind at an early age that I'm going to break the cycle, whether it's a good or bad cycle in my family. I'm going to make it out of the ghetto. I'm not going to be a statistic. I'm not going to end up like most of my friends, dead before they're 25 years old. We still have young brothers and sisters like that are fighting to get out. Yes. Those of us that come out of the institution, it is our job to go back and to make sure that they have a hand up and to make sure that they know somebody loves them and care about them beyond these failed policies that are going to keep being written to leave them out and to literally write them out of this society. So do you know what the masses are saying now as it relates to those that are not considered to be middle class America? They are right now, and I want the brothers and sisters, everybody that's listening to me, to do your research. They are literally putting infrastructure in place
That's what I wanted you to get
Okay.
to. Yes.
To literally put those people that are on a lower echelon into prison camps, or what is being termed now as ghetto informants. What does that mean? That means that monies are being set aside to place them in Section 8 homes or low-income housing and designate those housing areas and housing divisions based on what that particular person or family makes, and now they're stipulated as pretty much government
Subsidies or property.
basically.
So,
Okay.
Brian, break that down again. Make that clearer, because you said you made it clearer this morning.
Yeah. So if you look at it, the government is basically isolating a group of people so that they can actually keep up with this group and keep this group in a specified class.
Based on income.
Based on income. And based on them being labeled as poverty or
Low socioeconomic.
that's right, low income persons. Okay.
So they're building apartments
the
and houses?
the mega prisons that you're seeing right now is going to deal with the children.
With the criminals.
No, not just the criminals now. It's going to deal with, because they're starting at age 5 and 6. So it is to deal with those children that are going to come up through the school system but not be able, according to what they're put in place as far as the standard in reference to education, they're not going to pass the standard test, the standardized testing and everything that they put in place. So they're working their way through the public school system to the prison system. So they're enlarging the prison system for those young men coming out that are going to be offenders in some capacity. And the first thing they're going to do, instead of trying to rehabilitate them, they're going to prosecute them and to throw them in prison. Now, the lower income echelon that does not qualify as middle class. If you look at middle class right now, the middle class standard based on inflation and interest is $120,000 a year per person. So if you are a married couple and you're working $240,000 a year based on the United States government census, with inflation and interest, is considered to be a middle class. They've created another group called lower middle class now. At one time, you never heard of lower middle class.
No.
You're now hearing that term, lower middle class. Why? Because it is the breakout of those that still make a decent salary,
right,
$75,000 to $100,000 a year, but they're not over that. Okay? And they still have to pay the same taxation as middle class. Those that depend on subsidies, that are disabled, those that are below that bracket, which are considered poverty level poor people, lower income people, those people, the government is putting millions of dollars into developing housing to isolate those people to certain pockets of the town, certain housing that they will qualify for, and they will literally owe pretty much the government. The government is putting...
You can see that happening now.
It's happening all over the United
Yes,
States.
it is.
Okay, so housing developments that are being subsidized through the government. Okay, those people get loans and they're literally they're locked into those loans, and those are literally known now as ghetto internment camps. So even the low-income housing has numbers associated with, or identification numbers associated with, the lower income housing that people will have access to. So when we look at literally what is going on If we don't develop our own housing, if we don't have developers and construction
Let me
companies.
ask you this. So just say if you got a millionaire. I'm going to use this as an example. I know this for a fact, and it's been all over the news and all over TikTok, social media. T.I. out of Atlanta.
But I don't want to bring up the.
I'm just saying he's building homes, apartment complexes for people to help them.
Yeah, but still, what T.I. is doing, okay, like I said, I don't want to reference T.I. and people and all the social media hype, but he's building low-income apartments. Okay.
To help people that don't have.
No, it's not helping people. Now, let me say why it's not helping people. It's helping him. All right. Why do I say that? Because the low-income people never have the opportunity to buy. They're locked into a housing company. So what he's putting up, the whole slogan of I'm helping my people, is to divert people and to make people empathetic and apathetic as it relates to lower income people that don't have the opportunity to own property and be considered a citizen of this country like everybody else. So now the diversion is you got an African American that's wealthy that says, okay, I'm putting up these apartments to help my people. It's a diversion. You're not helping your people. You're locking your people into long-term rental contracts. They're never owned, but you continue to get wealthy based off of their poverty. That doesn't help people. So it's a diversion. We have to make sure that these black people need to be citizens. And if the United States Constitution still has in it that in order to be considered a citizen, you must own property, then we should be, those of us that have the means,
should be trying to get some
to help develop housing for our people, should make sure they own those houses and they can own them outright.
Yes.
Without being tied to the government. You understand what I'm saying?
I get it.
So what T.I. is doing, and I don't know if he's building the apartments with his own money or if he's got a government grant to put up low-income housing, if he's working with the government, most likely he's working with the government. You understand what I'm saying? So like I said, it's a diversion, it's a distraction to say I'm doing something for my people, to keep them from looking at how wealthy you're getting off of the back of poor people.
Well, he's not the only one doing it. You got people everywhere that.
Yeah, but I don't like to talk.
But I'm saying, now I'm going to say what even right here in Alabama, right here in Montgomery, you have apartment complexes that are strictly for Section 8 housing.
And that is to continue to make money off the poor. And then you got to look at Section 8 homes. Majority of that is paid for by the who? By the government. So you have landlords. They know they're going to get their money. See, it's not what I'm showing you is that when you put up those internment camps and then you isolate a specific group of people to one side of town, you don't bring any businesses to that side of town. You got them all locked in Section 8 apartments. Okay, the government is paying the owner of those apartments majority of the rent. So whether or not the occupant of the apartment can pay the full thing or not, you're still getting 90% of your money from the government. You're going to get paid.
Well, they don't have to pay the full amount.
But still, sweetie, listen to what I'm saying, okay? I'm establishing a point here that it is a setup. It is not to help at all.
But what if it's somebody young that's trying to get on their feet and they're starting out in Section 8 until they finish school or whatever, and then they come out of that?
That's fine. You have your exceptions to every rule, like I've said. You have those that have a desire to break out, and they've done the research. They know what they're getting into before they sign any papers. They know what a Section 8 home is. They understand it. But how many young people do you have that understand that truly? How many people that are in Section 8 right now really understand what Section 8 really is? There are not many. So we have to take opportunities to educate our people. And we should be telling them, okay, if you're going to work with the government to develop homes, that's fine and dandy. But like I said, make it to where they own the homes clear and outright. That they can get a title deed just like everybody else.
Right.
And that they are known as property owners.
And they can pass that on to their children.
Yeah, and they can establish citizenship. They can now begin to build generational wealth because they own their home. They won't ever own the lot. That's always owned by the government.
Yes.
You understand what I'm saying? Even the brick and mortar. The best thing is we need to help our people understand they need to have their own land. Okay, so we need to start pushing that again, owning our own land. At one time, black people owned land. You understand what?
Yes,
where we could do our own gardening, we could develop our own towns, things of that nature. I would even say black towns now. Selma, Alabama is a perfect example. Selma, Alabama could literally be a black Mecca if it had leadership that understood its value as being an all-black town and taking advantage of some of the laws that are put in place for black towns.
Yes.
You understand? Black cities. Okay, I'm not talking about the metropolis black cities like a Chicago or a Detroit, but when we're dealing with small cities, there's opportunity there that the bigger cities cannot qualify for. Okay, so those are the things that we have to start educating ourselves about when it comes to development. We have to understand the logistics of development. We have to understand the design process of development. We have to understand that there are investors, the A, B, C, and D of what it is to actually bring in business, to attract developers and investors that want to come in, how to revamp our education system.
Yes.
You understand? Like I said, so, and to reverse the regression that's now taking place within our community. You know, from 1964 to 2024, 60 years later, we got to reverse. We're regressed. We got to reverse that. So all of those things are very important if we're going to move forward as a people. You understand? Yeah. So any other questions you had? Any?
Oh, that's very interesting. Very interesting.
And I could go more into detail about it, brothers and sisters, and maybe we'll do that on another show. And I will actually break it down and make it even more granular. Yeah. You understand what I'm saying? But people need to know that there's nothing. The bottom line is this, Janice. There's nothing that the government is going to give you for free.
I know that.
Okay, black people, we got to get out of the mindset that we're getting something for free. No, there's something attached to it. The question is whether or not you read the fine print.
Exactly.
To know what is attached to it. A lot of times we don't read the fine print. Okay, we should have read the fine print of DEI. We should have read the fine print of affirmative action. We need to go back and read. I got pocket constitutions that I pass out. Okay, I'm out of them now, so I got to order some more. And I try to specifically give them to black people. I see them in the grocery store, just walking the street. I would hand them a pocket constitution, say, when you got time, read it. It's not long, but we need to go back and break that down. And that's what I did in my book. I broke down the Constitution to help people understand the coded words in there so that they could see that really 13th, 14th Amendment didn't get us anything. Literally. What it did was allow white people to say that we would give you access to some of the things that we have.
But not all.
Okay, there you go. But not all.
Yes.
Okay, we will allow you to experience it, but it's still ours. And see, this Constitution relates to us, even though you built the country for us. See, slavery, if every slave would have run away from the plantation, slavery would have ended. You didn't need no Emancipation Proclamation. Those white slave masters didn't know how to plant anything. They didn't know how to take care of livestock. They didn't know how to build anything. The people from the Angola and Congo in West Africa were farmers, were herdsmen, were blacksmiths.
Yeah, we saw that, yes.
If all the slaves would have said, we out of here, organized and all of them run away at the same time, slavery would have been over. You understand? See, we still on the American plantation, whether we want to admit it or not. Because everything we do in our jobs is their laws. We don't have any laws specifically related to how we deal with our culture. We deal with our culture based on the laws that they've put in place, and they stipulate to us that we can do and how we should do and what we should say and how we should render out judgment. You understand what I'm saying? We don't really have an education system. We have to play the game of their education system. That's why they can go in and say, well, we're going to ban this book. And they can go in and say slavery wasn't really slavery. It was indentured servitude.
That's critical race theory.
You understand what I'm saying? That's why they can say those things. Yeah. Because they know that we're locked into their system. You don't have an America. You have been allowed to stay in America, but with the stipulation that you abide by our laws and you do what we say. If you cannot do that, then as politicians have said now, you can leave this America. We don't need you, regardless of what your ancestors did, regardless of them building this country. There would have been no wealth in the South if it wasn't for the labor of our people. You understand what I'm saying? There would have been no Washington, D.C. if it wasn't for Benjamin Banneker designing the layout based off of Egypt. You understand? So when we look at the whole thing, we have got to stop this illusion and false reality that we live in and fantasizing and thinking that we have arrived because we've received an institutionalized form of learning that has dumbed us down to the point to where we don't even love our own people anymore. We don't care about our own people. We don't make the necessary sacrifice that really would make an impact on our people. All of those things, literally, they've been thrown out the window. You understand? So we've got to get back to really identifying who we are and how to break the back of the giant. Now, I've said this on one program. I'm going to continue to say it until I transition out of here. The way that we break the back of the political giant that's in place now, black people have to come together
and form their own party.
Form a black party. We're 22 plus million strong. I'm talking about just African Americans. Okay? 22 million plus strong. If we formed our own party and voted our own representatives into power, you understand what I'm saying? They cannot deny what we bring to the table then. You understand? Until we put a demand, see, Sister Fannie Lou Hamer had the right concept when she formed the Mississippi Freedom Party. You understand? She had the right concept. But when they came to the table, they said, we're only going to allot you just one. She said, no. If you can't give us more than one representative seat at the table, then we'll take our policy and we'll go back to the people. And we'll fight locally and we'll revamp. We will be your worst nightmare. We don't have people like that anymore. See, we got the black boule and the bourgeois. They don't talk about Dr. King broke the back of the political system. We love to throw up Dr. King, but we don't talk about who he was aligning with before his assassination. You understand what I'm saying? The groups that he was aligning with, the federal government considered those black terrorist groups. You understand? Mm-hmm. See, we don't talk about those things. Like I said, we have bought into the sanitized version of our leaders that was given to us by a European educational system. And European institutions have sanitized and picked out bits and pieces to integrate into our minds what to think about our leaders. And then we get so hung up on the sanitized version that we miss the true struggle of what they were fighting for. They don't really talk about why Medgar Evers was really assassinated. They don't go into those things. I don't hear anybody talking about Martin Delany, who was just as instrumental and was the mentor to Harriet Tubman. See, we get sanitized versions. Okay? We get the sanitized versions.
Those people were really about their people.
Yes,
they were really fighting
really about the freedom and liberation. So what is freedom? We've said this. Freedom is when you are born naturally of God, you are free, meaning that nobody has any authority over who you are as a human being. When you are born, you're born free. That is God-given. Liberty is when the law is parted out equally and you have the same access as everyone else in the country or in the nation that you abide in. So liberty refers to law. Freedom refers to spirituality. There's a difference. So our people fought for, our ancestors fought for freedom and liberty. They wanted to be free under the law, to have equality under the law, just as everybody else that existed in that nation. And they fought for their God-given right to be free. They were never slaves. They were not born slaves. They were born free. You understand what I'm saying? We have to understand those things, Janice, if we're going to really make a difference in our people's lives. And as leaders have to understand that. You know, we sometimes get so caught up into our own identity and our own successes and what our own interest is politically that we don't really give a darn about our people. We don't really care about our people. We care about using them as a platform to flaunt my next award. You understand? And that has never benefited a community. True leadership is not just concerned about their rise to the top. Okay? And we have a lot of leaders that are literally, the only thing they're concerned about is their rise to the top. Okay? So we will end there. Rosie, I could go on all night.
I want to thank my friend Rosie Nix for watching us tonight.
Oh, thank you, Rosa. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody that was watching. Yeah. I saw Brother Donovan on. So hey,
Sanithia,
yes.
Petway, thank you. Thank you, Rosie,
Sanithia.
so much. You're so beautiful.
Yes.
So sweet.
Everybody, there was a few people also. We thank you all. Hopefully, we added to you. And hopefully you enjoyed this show tonight. And we're going to continue to talk about this.
Yeah.
And we will discuss also, the election. We're getting close, like I said.
Yeah.
So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But again, peace, family. We love you, and God bless you.
Have a great night. Have a great week. We'll see you soon.